Today we're gonna cover 12 different insane people in history. Some you might know about. But before we do, I want one honorable mention. And that's Horia Sima, which I didn't cover last time. And people saying things like, Horia Sima was an irrelevant loser that came in and became leader of the legionnaires, because they themselves were cretins. Atanesco then, or Horia Sima. So let's move on, shall we? Carl Schmitt, born 1888 in Prussia. Now, this is quite an important person when it comes to understanding politics. We can talk about him for hours, but let's just discuss a few concepts, a few of the books.
Dieses liberale Bürgertum, des demokratischen Trends, der in der Zeit lag, lebte der Illusion, Liberalismus und Demokratie sei dasselbe.
So these are the two books that are usually brought up, talking about Carl Schmitt, which is political theology and the concept of the political. And I should do an honorable mention to the third one, which is constitutional theory. There is quite a lot of hatred towards Carl Schmitt for reasons of his political stance, but one interesting aspect is Schmitt was brought back into academia because of anarchists, because anarchists really likes his theory, and now his theory is being used both by the left and the right. Before going in, I just want to do another quick note. The damn foreword and introduction is half the books at this point. Come on. So we're going to go into the misusage of this book, which is the friend and foe idea. Because it's constantly being misused by focus on territorial or group ideologies in contrast to the enemy, but not understanding why the contrast is important. According to modern linguistic usage, the state is the political status of an organized people in an enclosed territorial unit. This is nothing more than a general paraphrase, not a definition of the state. Since we're concerned here with the nature of the political, such a definition is unwarranted. To show you misuse of the friend and foe concept, here it is. As a person who misunderstands what Schmitt means, but at the same time goes into it by describing an enemy in counter to himself without understanding what he's doing. He says the enemy is bad, we have to fix the enemy is bad. I am good, I am friend, they are enemy, fight them. But it's like, no, you identify your group, your territory, by describing an enemy, because it's easier to describe something in the negative than in the positive. Quick note from Schmitt. These then receive the meaning by presupposition of a stable state within framework they operate. Thus, there exists, for example, a jurisprudence or a literature pertaining to the concept of the political club or the political meaning in the laws of association.
Ein Volk kann mit sich selbst identisch sein, wenn es in einer eindeutigen, klaren Weise einen Feind hat, wo klare Freund-Feind-Unterscheidungen sind, wie heute im Nahen Osten oder dergleichen, ist die Identität ohne weiteres klar. Weil Freund heißt in diesem Falle die intensivste Gruppe und Verbindung von Menschen. Und Feind heißt eben die intensivste Spannung.
The friend and enemy concept ought to be understood in their concrete and existential sense, not as metaphor or symbols, not mixed and weakened by economy, moral or other conceptions, least at all in private, an individualistic sense of a psychological expression of private emotions and tendencies. They are neither normative nor pure spiritual antithesis. Liberalism, in one of its typical dilemmas of intellectual and economic, has attempted to transform the enemy from the viewpoint of economies into a competitor, from the intellectual point into a debating adversary. In the dominion of economies, there are no enemy, only competitors. And it's through a moral and ethical world perhaps only debating adversaries. It is irrelevant here whether one rejects or accepts, or perhaps finds an atavistic remnant of a barbaric time that nations continue and group themselves according to the friend and enemy, and hopes that there is an antithesis will one day vanish from the world. And whether it perhaps sounds pedagogic reasoning to imagine the enemy no longer existing at all, the concern here is neither the abstraction nor the normative ideas, but inherent realities and real possibilities of such distinctions. One may not share these hopes and pedagogical ideals, but rationally speaking, it cannot be denied that nations continue to group themselves according to the friend and enemy antithesis, that the distinction still remains actual today, that is even present possibly for every person existing in the political sphere. So we move on to the next book, Political Theology. This is also just an amazing book, also mostly written by anarchists. Try to bring this book back into the fray because it goes into how religion and politics, but in specifically the Catholic Church, because Carl Schmitt was Catholic, has influenced the political landscape, both in the sense of the rhetoric, but also how law is written and how kingdoms are ruled. And a good way of understanding this, it goes into quite a lot obviously, is during feudalism, for example, the king, the warrior caste, they were too focused on ruling, in a sense, ruling with the sword. They were not learned men. They couldn't spend 10 years in a school learning how to write and read. But who could do that? Monks could do that. So monks mostly wrote law, wrote down history. This then influenced how law would then be framed through mostly a Christian worldview. I use the example of the Rother's Law Code here as an example where things can change based upon who writes down the law codes. When the Lombards came to Italy, they had a verbal law code that they brought from Scandinavia. But it was later written down, first in a more Arianistic sense, because they were Arianists, where God the Father was mentioned, but not really in that detail. And then later on it was written down by Byzantine monks, Paul the Deacon, for example. And then God and prayer was much more taken in towards the law code. So it changed based upon who wrote it. If a king wrote it of the people, at the time when they were mostly pagan, semi-Arianistic, the Father, all Father was there. It's seen in the law code versus when the Byzantine monks wrote it down, and then God and the Son became much more focused. But it also has an influence today in rhetoric such as Armageddon, the end of times rhetorics. As you saw with the former quote, this is a Christian concept that he's talking about. Like, if we do not win, this is the end. This is a Christian concept. It goes into pretty much every political idea for the moment, that if you're not part of us, you are the end times. If I don't win, it's the end times. And you heard this with, well, you hear it with Trump, but it actually started with Hillary Clinton, where he said if she doesn't win, this is the end of the United States. Is that the end of the United States? Of course it isn't. But it's a very good political tool and a mindset people have that if my ideas, because I'm the moral, I'm the good, and they're the enemy, it goes back to that obviously, they're the enemy, they're the bad, if they win, this is the end of times, and it's a Christian concept. I am one with God, they are not with God. If they win, we lose. And then I will quickly go into the constitutional theory. A lot of what Schmitt's talking about is also creating stability. Mostly stability in text and writing, but also how to gain power and gain stability after, for example, a coup or a revolution, or what happened in Nazi Germany. And this book in particular goes into how to write a proper constitution, what should retain a proper constitution, how to ratify constitutions, how to bring in different concepts into constitutions. Overall, a very good theory. Neoliberals, I think, use this quite a lot. Constitutional theory, it's great, but it goes into many other concepts as well.
Wie richtig gerechnet, erst sich die legale Macht geben zu lassen, Verfügung über Polizei und so weiter. Dann eine Wahl gewinnen mit Hilfe also dieser
Prämien auf den
legalen ja, ist aber eine ganz knappe Mehrheit. Und nun kommt ja eigentlich das noch fantastischere, dann ein verfassungsänderndes Ermächtigungsgesetz zu bekommen, ja, da kann man wirklich tiefsinnig werden.
There's obviously a lot more I can talk about. I can talk about the sovereign and stability and a few other concepts, but we'll stop with this one and move to the next. Another quick thing I want to point out for the eagle-eyed viewer that knows me, I have a website called The State of Exception, which is based upon Carl Schmitt's ideas of state of exception, but mostly in a poetic sense that the current world we're living in is the state of exception. And I have a book out as well that talks somewhat about the theories and a few other things, so do check that out. It's a way of supporting me as well. Varg Vikernes, another person I can talk for hours about, not because of his political theories, but because of his influence in paganism and modern day black metal scene, and honestly just the gossip. Not a fan of black metal myself, but I can appreciate a little Hail Horton, Heloden, Heloden, Heloden,
Heloden, Heloden.
The Norwegian black metal scene got somewhat fame in the 90s because of the burning down of churches, with a semi-satanic view and all of it. And then later on, Varg Vikernes himself got the fame for murdering another black metal artist named Euronymous, Oystein Aarseth, that Varg Vikernes stabbed 23 times. He claimed it to be self-defense, which no, the courts obviously didn't think it was. But he also took a picture of the corpse and used it as an album cover. So, pretty metal, bro! But in truth, and sort of the feeling the internet has for the moment, what made Varg more famous is, since he got out of jail, his commentary. He's been talking about all types of things, adding his 2 cents on most subjects. He got a life in France, has multiple children, a wife. It's a lifestyle many envy.
Staying alive, staying alive, staying alive.
Curtis Yarvin, or as I like to frame him, the dumber version of Nick Land. He's part of that sort of tech.com bubble intellectuals that came around the 2000s, especially 2008, but obviously was before that. Same thing with Peter Thiel or Kurt Doolittle, for my sake. I have a lot of money, I think I'm smart, let me create something new, focusing a lot on monarchy, for example. But the concept of cathedral was brought up a lot by him, and that's now a word most people use, explaining the liberal zeitgeist of the current world. But much more than that, he was brought in towards the mainstream around 2020, because that was when a new right was forming. And I don't mean a new right like the alt-right or anything like that, around 2016, but a more new right, which is the controlled opposition American right, with Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon, and these people, the controlled opposition that are obviously bankrolled by, if you read the files, you get a little bit of an understanding. And he's part of this, brought in mostly by the Democratic side, having a fascination of him as well. Because, again, when I pointed out previously, Hillary Clinton, certain part of the Democratic establishment has a little bit of a thing with certain right-wing stability concepts of Carl Schmitt, for example. And there was some sort of amalgamation between Curtis Yarvin and Hillary Clinton as well around the first Trump election, which was interesting. But stability overall, that's all that matters really for the Clinton side, the more pragmatic or political realists. Curtis Yarvin was part of creating a new stability concepts brought forth by Nick Land and Schmittian concepts, talking a lot about monarchy or the focus on stability with technology and this sort of forever lasting sovereign. And the forever lasting sovereign is quite an interesting aspect and a bit of a fight between Nick Land, Curtis Yarvin, and Peter Thiel. Particularly Thiel not liking it because the point is technological singularity, as in, well, everlasting sovereign is an AI, for example, of sorts. And Peter Thiel then views that as the Antichrist, or, well, Antichrist will come in certain aspects. So the AI Antichrist can be brought forth through that technological singularity that Curtis and Nick is talking about. But, yeah. A lot of his economic ideas is from Hans Hermann Hoppe. So this is the idea of the monarchy or nation states and smaller republics. But as some friend of mine pointed out, give Curtis Yarvin a copy of the Leviathan and he might implode because he doesn't grasp hops at all. Rene Guenon, born 1886. One of the more influential people in religious studies, I would say, and especially influential in Schmitt's work on political theology, because Guenon works through a sort of time span of religious influence, where he looks into history and formulating it through mostly focusing on the priestly class, just as Schmitt did, but a much more broader, long-time horizon way of thinking on how society is built upon this priestly class structures, as in ritualistic structures, for example, or other concepts where the warrior caste, which other people like Julius Evola brought up, focusing on the warrior caste, he focused on the priestly class, and any moving away from the priestly class, which is the most influential caste in Western civilization, is moronic. Something Schmitt also brings up. It's kind of moronic looking at the king when the priest is the one writing history. Not just writing history, is doing the rituals of the king, is deciding what the king does, is deciding how the king self-identifies. And this is throughout majority of the reign's times. Obviously, there's certain exceptions that you can bring up, which Evola likes to bring up, but overall, Guenon focusing on the priestly class, ritualistic, systematic, symbolistic structures of the entirety of civilization. And the we're doing today, removing ourselves from this fact. And what will bring down Western civilization, which is the destruction of the traditional, focusing on the modern, where you remove that long lineage for something new and experimental, which will bring down the collapse of everything. The focus on caste, for example, is because he was inspired by Hindu gurus that came into Europe. We don't know exactly who, but that was influential. So he wrote a lot about Hinduism in a Western perspective and brought in a new era of Hinduism in Europe that then later also obviously inspired Theosophy and inspired New Age and all of this. But bringing forth this symbiosis between Hinduism and Western Catholic Christianity of sorts. Rene Guenon was a Catholic. Again, you can talk for hours about this. It goes into detail about, well, the smallest of aspects of civilization, how everything is formed, but it's in very well detailed and sort of systematic how he does it, which brings up certain errors, and you can't do everything systematic, but it is really good. The school of thought brought after him is a traditional school by Fridtjof's Schorn, Martin Links, Evola, as you heard about, Spengler, in a sense, Dugin and Schmitt, and many of these other concepts. Again, this is a man who sat down and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and created it all into one very complicated to read in one sense, symbiosis of here's an understanding how we work. I have made videos about this previously, talking about rituals, and I've made a video where he mocks Evola because he thinks Evola is genuinely a brainlet retard. It's just, oh, it's good. So yeah, enjoy the little clip and then we'll move on.
You stupid.
They're not.
As long as a man desire paradise or has fear of hell, he will not be able to aspire to the last grade of initiation.
21.
Zelko Malnar.
Zelko Malnar.
Okay, I get it. This is a bit of an odd one in comparison to the other ones. But let's have fun with this one. And also, I know, you look at Croatian people, you know, and you think, yeah, these are Croatian people. These are definitely modern day Croatian people. Majority of his filmography is documentaries based upon Africa or Latin America. And half of the documentaries are women's breasts. I can't show it. It's just Native American breasts for some reason.
Kuć, pogledajte tu djecu, pogledajte tu nevinost. To je nada svijeta. U to treba vjerovati. Bože moj, evo sad to gledam, kako je to lijepo. Evo dijete koje je tad možda imalo koliko, godinu dana, sada je 27 godina. Di je? A gdje je ova mala sad? A gdje su ova dva mala klinca? Imaju sad 27 godina. Ja, a vjerovatno.
They're decently cute, but again, half of them are naked men and women. I guess, some sort of good documentary, but it reminds me a lot of this sort of 90 era sexual European documentary style. Quite odd. Then he obviously got famous in Croatia and did many Croatian shows. I'll show you one for fun called The Nightmare Stage. I don't understand it. I don't speak Croatian. It's not really much I can talk about this guy. But hey, we talked about him. Let's move on.
Pijano đubre.
Ševu pokaži. Ševo, daj ti neke reci na ove pozive.
Ma ja velim, pa to je pijano đubre. Šta vređaš? To sam vam puno puta rekao.
Ne, o tu reži.
Ovo je mlada dama. Dobio jutro,
Koju
izvolite.
pičku materinu političari se javljaju? Pravi političari.
Zašto nas jebe hrvatski narod?
Pa takvi smo se rodili i takvi smo umrli.
Istina, da.
Znači ja sam uvredio Željka Malnara što on meni kaže nemoj piti. Pa ja bi već kad bi slušao druge, rekao mi je jedan, kaj?
Georgy Chulkov. Now this is more in my ballpark. I really like this. It's gonna be fun going through this one. But I want to say there's absolutely no interest in this man. Looking up on YouTube, 2 views, baby. He's part of an era called the Silver Age of literature. He was also quite into philosophy and politics. One of the concepts he created is mystical anarchism. But it is a mindset within Russian symbolism. It combines mystical worldview with social views of the era to fight against dogmatics in religion, moral philosophy and politics, affirming of the mystical personality in society, internal freedom of the individual, striving for conclarity, super-individualism, rejection of the world, meaning mystical anarchists do not accept the world as is, and dream of a transformed world. A lot of the Russian novelists after the fact was inspired by one of his books, Theoretical Shortcoming, Confusion of Presentation and a Lack of Independence. And especially in Russian anarchistic circles, where a lot of people took up this Russian symbolism into their anarchistic worldview, creating things like the Eastern detachment of the Templars of the Universal Order of the Knight Templar, or Order of Light, which was to combine the elements of Freemasonry and anarchism. Russian symbolism, mystical anarchism, and the Silver Age of literature did have an influence later on. So Gregory is not someone you should just ignore if you're interested in Russian literature. I'll read you one of his poems, one of the poems that I saw in one of those 2 views videos, but why not? Purple Autumn. Purple autumn unloosed her trenches and flung them on the heavens and over the dew-heavy fields. She came as a guest to the old, silent house, singing the grasses with red. Through the garden she moved, up to the balcony. Scarcely she touched the fragile old rails. She pushed the door panel softly. Softly she entered the room, sprinkling the rugs with her sun-yellow dust. Dropped a red leaf upon the piano. Even after the hour we heard her unceasing, her tireless rustle and stir and soft whisper, and our hands suddenly met, with no new words, new and forever false, as though we had hung a wrench of red roses on a black wrought iron door, lending into a vault where lay the rotten body of a beloved dream. Autumnly days were upon us, days of inscrutable longing. We were trending the stairs of autumn passion, in my heart a wound, like a lamp of an icon, burn and would not be quenched. The cup of autumnal poison we pressed to our lips. By the serpentine garden path autumn had led us, the crepuscular lilies upon the pale sand humble pond, and over the lilied waters and the roses of evening we loved. More superstitionally, and through the dark night, and the languorous bed, and at the feet of my love, I loved death anew. The minutes rang tinkling like crystals at the brink of an autumn grave. Autumn and death drunkenly clinked their glasses. I pressed my thirsty lips to the feet of the icon lamp burnish. I drank the cup of love. Burned by the fires of sins, stretched on the crest of lusts, shamed, being needlessly faithless, I drank the cup of love. In the hours of ineffable dalliance, I sensed the whispers of autumn pain, of autumn passion, the kisses like keen needles, burned and pierced, weaving a wrench of thorns. After whatever just happened, I can now understand Leopold Von Sacher-Masoch expression. For you to understand who he is, the Macho in German doesn't make any sense, but what if I say masochism? The name masochism derives from him. And sadomasochism is Marquis de Sade and Leopold. He's born 1836 in Galicia. That should be telling you enough. And to summarize him, it's Baroness Bogdanov's romantic gesture to her lost soul in Galicia created ripples of sexual energy lasting for generations. More or less this type of relationship they was having. He was a quote-unquote slave or submissive towards this baroness in doing whatever needed. And he wrote about it. So, well, in fiction he wrote about it. So, shall we read it, I guess, for a bit?
Décidez-vous, faites quelque chose pour vous en convaincre.
Mais comment?
En faisant ce que font tous les amoureux. Faites-moi souffrir.
Wanda swiftly approached me. Her white satin dress flowed behind her in a long train, like silver, like moonlight. Her hair flared like flames against the white fur of her jacket. Now she stood in front of me, with her left hand firmly planted on her hips. In her right hand she held a whip. She uttered an abrupt laugh. "Now play has come to an end between us," she said with heartless coldness. "Now we will begin in dead earnest. You fool. I laughed at you and despise you. You who in your insane infatuation has given yourself as a plaything to me. The frivolous and capricious woman. You are no longer the man I love, but my slave. At my mercy even unto life and death. First of all, you shall have the taste of the whip in all seriousness, without having done anything to deserve it, so that you may understand what to expect if you're awkward, disobedient, or refractory. With the what? Okay, you get it? You get it? I'm gonna stop now. It continues like this. And 50 Shades of Grey. No, even worse. This is... She struck me in the face, warm blood ran down, but she laughed and continued her blows. He's tied up, by the way. So about halfway in the book, it's a master-slave dynamic, BDSM, but it's smart. He's I'm a big philosopher. I'm an Austrian nobleman in Galicia. I'm gonna write. No, he doesn't even write smut. It's based upon his actual life experience. It's not just a concept of the man being so submissive and super submissive in a relationship over someone who dominates him. It's also then the pity and the disgust the woman actually feels of a weak man, where they call a lion comes later on to, well, cock the slave, and you go through that pleading. The lioness had been hunted and driven until she was exhausted. She had fallen asleep among her pillows, laying on her back, her hands clenched, breathing heavily, and let the red light fall full of her wonderful face. "Severin," she began anew, "my poor unhappy friend." Her hand gently stroked my hair. "I am sorry, very sorry for you, but I can't help you. With the best intentions in the world, I know of nothing that can cure you." "Oh, Wanda, must it be?" I moaned in my agony. "What, Severin? What are you talking about?" "Don't you love me any more?" I continued. "Haven't you a little bit of pity for me? Has the stranger taken complete possession of you?" "I can't lie," she replied softly after a pause. "He has made an impression on me, which I haven't yet been able to analyze, further than I suffered and trembled beneath it. It's an impression of the sort I've met within the works of poems or on the stage, but I always thought it was a figment of my imagination. Oh, he is a man, like a lion, strong and beautiful and yet gentle, not brutal like the men of our northern world. I am so sorry for you, Severin. I am. I must possess him. What am I saying? I must give myself to him, if he will have me. Consider your reputation, Wanda, which so far has remained spotless, I exclaimed, even if I no longer mean anything to you. I'm considering it, she replied. I intend to be strong as long as possible. I want... She buried her head shyly in the pillow. I want to become his wife, if he will have me. Wanda, I cried, seized by my mortal fear, which always robs me of my breath, makes me lose possession of myself. You want to be his wife? Belong to him for always? Oh, don't drive me away. He does not love you. Who says that? She exclaimed, flaring up. He does not love you. I went on passionately. But I love you. I adore you. I am your slave. I let you thread me underfoot. I want to carry you in my arms through life. Who says he doesn't love me? She interrupted vehemently. Oh, be mine, I replied. Be mine. I cannot exist, cannot live without you. Have mercy on me, Wanda. Have mercy. With this she turned over on the side, compassionately shoved me her back. Good God! Are you a woman without flesh and blood? Haven't you a heart as well as I cried, while my breast heaved convulsively. You know who I am, she replied, coldly. I am a woman of stone, Venus in furs, your ideal. Kneel down and pray to me. And then later on he tries to state, I will kill myself if I'm not with you. Then he writes letters. And at the very end, the last page, he proclaims that he hates women. He hates them. I was a donkey. If only I've beaten her. And then ends with, the moral of the tale is this. Whoever allows himself to be whipped deserves to be whipped. It's weirdly enough is a pretty good character description of a cock. Of Mr. Idubs of Galicia here. If a woman has no respect for you, if you ever go below her, submissive to her to such an extent, it's a bit of a, imbalance, she will never respect you. And if you never respect you, if you beg, if you whimper, you blah, 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 put yourself in that position, you will not be good. You deserve to be whipped, according to Leopold.
Vous êtes incroyable.
Si vous ne voulez pas de moi comme mari, prenez-moi comme esclave. Traitez-moi avec une divine cruauté.
Pourquoi devrais-je maltraiter l'homme qui m'aime?
Mais je vous adorerai encore plus.
Je ne souhaite pas qu'on m'adore.
Toutes les femmes veulent être adorées, tout comme notre créateur. Créez-moi, ruinez-moi, réduisez-moi à néant.
Ramon Gomez de la Serna. Some of you might know him from the Hoy4 mod Red Flood, where he is the accelerationist Spain. He's known as a cubist, a futurist, avant-gardist, but mostly a comedian. Most of his works is comedy. It's short comedy lines and jokes to laugh at the world around you, because the world is odd.
Caliginosa de todo el gallinero. Esta cosa lenta. Esos gritos de locura que brotan de el corral caliente por agosto. Que son alboroto de todo el pueblo, que son la raya con que se señala toda la dimensión del paisaje.
Most of his work is in Spanish, which obviously makes it a bit hard for me to read. It's sort of not actually that possible. Most famous book of his, Gregoria, which is a collection of small sentences of jokes, like a joke sentence, one-liners, punchlines. He had a lot of respect in the Spanish world, especially in Spain during the Civil War. He stayed in Spain during the Civil War and was liked by the elites of sorts, from my understanding. And so he's both left and right. Obviously being liked by everybody also makes you not being liked by everybody. The paradox of it. He met up with Diego Rivera, which is the husband of Frida Kahlo, and Diego drew this painting of him.
Esta mano sirve para en la tempestad del público calmarla plenamente. Y por fin, cuando el orador ya está próximo al final de su discurso, sirve para preparar su planear, porque esta cosa que tiene el orador de aviador se remonta, parece que va seguro en sus palabras, de pronto se rompe la cabeza en una de ellas, señala la caída en barrena en esa palabra que le falla. El orador.
Jim Bell, or James Dalton Bell. He's still alive. He is born in 1958 in Ohio. He popularized a concept in the 90s about how, with the growth of the internet, the concept of untraceable assassination will become possible using untraced digital currency or cryptocurrency. This is obviously before the time. And then with crypted digital currency, there's also crypted messaging or information that can be put in to go on hits on anybody who has a disliking of anybody. So as long as you have the money, you can kill more or less anybody at any time using internet assassins, or, you know, red rooms or assassins using the dark web, sort of that spooky story that was told many times. He's an anarcho-capitalist.
I'm a libertarian. I've been a libertarian all my life. I realized I was a libertarian in 1975. Libertarians are motivated by something called the non-aggression principle, or the non-initiation of force principle. It's been humorously described as the rights of my fist end at your nose, okay? I can swing my fist all around until I get to your nose, in which case my right ends, all right? In other words, non-aggression. We have a society where almost everything today is done by ultimate threat of government force. If government force, they don't show up automatically. If you don't pay your taxes, they'll send you some threatening mail. If they still don't send if you don't send your taxes, they go to your bank and take your bank account. Or if you don't have a bank account, they have gold, they break in and take it. So ultimately, governments are based on the ultimate threat of violence to you if they don't get what they want.
There's a great video about it called James Bell's Assassination Policy. I float this up on you so you can see a bit of a text. You see cache with details, the decryption key, and then money in encryption that will be getting to you once you do the deed. It's sort of already been debunked. Red rooms and online assassins in the dark web is not really a thing. It's a hell of a ghost tale that people like to tell each other around the campfire of the internet. Like, oh yeah, the assassins. You know, you got the Silk Road and all of that. So it's a lot of encryption. But that's dead, I would say. The golden era of the internet, where that was possible, isn't anymore. Overall, from watching that part of him, he's a bit delusional. He says if Bitcoin increases 3%, he has a complete strategy on how to increase the volume of Bitcoin. And if he follow his strategy, Bitcoin will increase about 3 times, and it was in 2019. And he says if it increases 3 times, is my doing, I did it, I increased the value of Bitcoin.
Is anybody going to argue that, well, Bell, you didn't really do that, it was actually just some market fluctuation? I think most people around here would agree that if the price of Bitcoin triples in the next few weeks, it will be because of me. It's a good project. It'll be fun to do. It'll get people to think. And it might cause a lot of politicians to resign, because I'm thoroughly convinced these people are afraid. They know what happens.
Otto Weininger. With this one, I just take the cat out of the bag immediately. It's a very Jewy Jew. But that's what makes all of this so fascinating. Like, there is a lot to this man. Again, this is a stereotypical sort of merchant middle class Jew. Well-educated, get pushed into academia. His father is a goldsmith. And he's focused a lot on the concept of the sexual. In all of that, he also hates Jews, which is also a very Jewy thing to do. Self-hating Jew is a concept in the Jewish mindset. So with all of that, you can understand as well, when finding articles or reading about Otto, it's very hateful against him, being like, oh, he's an anti-Semite, he's a horrible misogynist, he's influenced National Socialists. I view more of it as a tragedy, all of this story, to be honest. Otto is born in 1880. At the age of 1898, he went to the University of Vienna. He could speak English, Greek, Latin, French, Spanish, Italian, Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian, and German, of course. So an incredibly intelligent young man, but also quite sensitive. In 1901, at the age of 21, he published his first work, Eros and the Psyche. He met with Sigmund Freud, who didn't actually like the text and sort of just said, begun. He received his doctorate in 1902, so very young, 22 years of age, and he converted to Protestantism. In 1902, he went and watched Richard Wagner's Parsifal. He went to Oslo to watch Henrik Ibsen's Per Gynt, and when he came back home to his life in Vienna, he was depressed. In 1903, he published another book, Sex and Character, a fundamental investigation. Harshly criticized, people claimed he was plagiarizing. So, in the 3rd of October, he went to a hotel in Vienna where Ludwig van Beethoven died, and he shot himself. So let's look into his work. A equals A, big A. Very important. Small a equals smaller a, big A equals big A. Unironically illogical thing, by the way, that's how it works. That is why he inspired Wittgenstein. So that's called first order logic. So he brings in that logical framework into the idea of the sex. And that's the book Sex and Character. I showed you the chapters before when I talked about his lifestyle, so sort of get a bit of an insight of what he's talking about. Very anti-Spinozized in a Kantian and a logical framework, and try to bring that into the sexes. Page 191. Given these ambivalent cases, the deciding factor can only be a man who is able to make a woman a mother through his personality, not only by sexual intercourse, but even by a single look. Marriage can only be introduced by man. There is no legal institution of female origin. Every law comes from man, and only a great many customs from women. For that reason alone, it will be totally wrong to derive law from custom or custom from law. They are quite different things. Only man could have the desire and the strength to introduce order into the chaos of sexual relationship, as indeed to introduce order, rules, and laws as such. There really seemed to be a time when women were allowed to exert great influence on social development in many people, but at that time marriage was unheard of. The age of matriarchy was an age of polyandry. To summarize that chapter, a woman is only two things. She's either a mother or a prostitute. A woman cannot be the third thing, which is a virgin. There's no such thing as a virgin woman. And the man is the deciding factor. If a woman becomes a mother, that's by impregnating her, or if she becomes a prostitute, that's by not impregnating her. If a man never impregnates a woman, she's a prostitute. And if she gets impregnated, she's a mother. While there are two distinctions, they are also the same. So it's the nature of a woman to be seeking male strength in one way or another, because women do not create or have the ability of that sort of power. Only the man has. And then it's up to the men not becoming females, which is something he imposes too. This is the A equals A. A man needs to also become a male, actually have those powers, not be tricked by the trickery of the female, which will happen, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's get the point why this could be deemed as controversial. And they have chapter 13, Judaism, which is where people deem him as an anti-Semite. 283. In the Christian, pride and humility. In the Jew, superciliousness and groveling are in conflict with each other, as are self-assurance and the contradictions in the former, and the arrogance and devotion in the latter. The Jew's lack of understanding of the idea of mercy is connected with his total lack of humility. His slavish disposition is the source of his heteronomous ethics. The Ten Commandments, the most immoral book of laws in the world, which promise well-being on earth, and the conquest of the world as a reward to those who meekly obey the powerful will of another. The Jew's relationship with Jehovah, the abstract idol which he fears like a slave, and the name of which he does not even dare to enunciate, he fears like a slave, characterizes him, in analogy to women, as a being in need of domination by an alien force. Schopenhauer once wrote, "The word of God means a human being who has made the world." This is indeed true of the God of the Jews, of the divine in humanity. The God who lives in my breast, the genuine Jew, knows nothing. He has no understanding of what Christ or Plato, Mr. Achthart, or St. Paul, Goethe, or Kant, or every Aryan from the Vedic priest, the magnificent closing line of Vikernes' three motives in the ground of belief, meant by the divine, or of the word "I am with you always, even to the end of the world." what is given to human being by God is his soul, but the absolute Jew is soullessness. I hope this gives a bit of an insight of what type of person he was, and just to make clear anything I've said, obviously I don't stand for any of this is his words, so yeah. Interesting character, definitely. But we'll go to the next one. Reza Negarestani. He is 49 years of age, so pretty young. He was inspired by Nick Land early on, so the focus of technology and this sort of language that Nick Land liked to use. I understood like Ouroboros and a few things, but more or less poetry or sort of technological poetry in a lot of his writing to explain reality of sorts. And then later stayed to become a rationalist, but still with the focus of the technological advances. His main focus is looking at technology in human history and the advancements of human history and where it's going, where we were, where's the patterns in all of it.
Technology, particularly cognitive technologies, cognitive techne, right, which would be tool making and language, are essentially an index that facilitated the emergence of a deep object called intelligence, as we know it today, such that we can go reflect back and say, oh my God, this has evolved over a very long time. So you see, from a certain sort of perspective, the fact that we see the role of technology in our evolution, self-recognize our history as being evolved in this sort of bottom-up, vertical, but also diagonal, horizontal complexity, is a result of this sort of technology, or cognitive technologies like language and tool use that allow us to go back and slowly decipher the deep object called intelligence.
Because he's alive, let's say the statement of, if you talk to Reza, what would we talk about? Well, mostly, one thing I would like to talk to him about is what I've talked about before, aesthetic anthropology. Focusing on the current art forms, aesthetics himself, writes that a lot. Again, that's why his book is sort of, that's why many of his books is quite colorful in its symbolisms, because art and the way of describing art, in a sense, I guess surrealist, but it's realist, but the way you frame something in aesthetics is a way of framing an understanding of the world. That's something would be of interesting conversation, especially with the person we're talking about last, about George Bataille, which aesthetic anthropology is sort of everything there. So this is a precursor, I say Reza is a precursor for Bataille in the later conversation on how via the aesthetics and via art you can describe a story. Now, I prefer the Nick Land. Well, no one really prefers. No one understands the Nick Land stories. No one does. You need to be high on quite a lot of drugs to understand any of the technological nonsense. And we do know, sort of, with all of this, with mathematical and logical systems, sort of computer science is a fake field. Nonsensical field, but whatever. But specifically with computer science or mathematicianal art, it can be very hard to understand if you're not part of that sort of already established aesthetic mindset. But it's a way of them describing reality via technology, and Bataille later via sex, because he's a degenerate. One of the concepts that Reza really likes is all of these damn wiggly lines, squiggly lines back and forth. No, it's time. It's an issue of time. So most of his books for the moment, and what he's writing for the moment, is about time travel and time paradoxes. How things can go in towards each other in different ways and loop on each other.
What does that mean? Well, this is essentially the premise of All You Zombies, the shorter story, wherein the protagonist, who is now a young man, goes to a bar and is writing some sort of column for bored women. Then he goes and sees this bartender, and the bartender starts a very special conversation with this young man who strangely looks like as if he has recently gone through gender transition. And then as the conversation unfolds, we see that the story involves with a certain sort of Ouroboros chronic figure, that essentially the bartender is the older version of this young man who works for an agency which is called the Temporal Agency. It is, he has recruited himself as an agent, going back in time, and then rescuing herself, getting injured during one of the missions, going through a radical sex surgery, becoming a man, marrying herself or himself, giving a child, and this child put in an orphanage through this special program made by himself in the Temporal Agency, supposed to be an agent, a time-traveling agent, that ultimately, at the same time, become a terrorist and a rescuer of the world, right? And he's always, and the last passage, the last paragraph of this story is that he has to kill himself, the terrorist version of himself, which is an old drunkard man. But he also misses, his female version, who basically he says at the end that I love you dearly, I miss you so much. And then the famous line that we know where we have all come from, meaning he and his other versions, her previous version, the child.
Or in other words, what drugs are you taking, bro? What the heck are you on about? Okay, that's sort of the concept. You have to be in that sort of technological intelligence to understand that. No, it doesn't. The concern is in the interesting aspect, obviously, as he talks about, with understanding does base upon language quite a lot, and it says human development through language. Yeah, absolutely. What differs me from the caveman? Technically nothing biologically, but mentally and with the technology around me, a lot changes. But I mean, it's not very smart. I remember when I was 14, 15, and I came up with this myself in history class. Like, oh, people don't change, technology does. I genuinely remember coming up in that in school when I was 14 years old. It's not that deep. I'm sorry, it's just... I mean, there's a lot more to this guy, but he hasn't caught my interest. And with Nick Land's language, I mean, people have already said I misunderstand a lot of it, but I'm sorry, taking LSD or any sort of ketamine drug and then just rambling isn't a good way of telling a story.
You organize it. This is what really Project of Ethics is. Design of a conduct that manipulates what the self is, what intelligible constitution is. It constructs it. And this is the project of self-realization, for example, for ramification of the Kantian project in the sense of ethics, and then goes to the new Confucianism and certain programs of ethics.
It was really just as a clarification. So you would say this ramification is like in principle possible for various different philosophical disciplines, whether it's aesthetics or ethics.
Okay, I do not. I have to think about this, but I just wanted to. The reason that I went for ethics, I wanted to just emphasize this idea of engineering, that engineering epistemology becomes co-constitutive and integral part of making sense of ontology and making it. The main kernel of this idea is actually a philosophical idea. And this is really the initial trigger of the project of ethics as a design of conduct. That crosscuts between ontology, between epistemology, between manipulation, between design.
George Bataille. Let's begin this. So let's go into what I talk about with Reza, the aesthetic anthropology aspect, because I talk about it in the video I made about him. So I'm just going to bring that one up so you can watch it and we can discuss it. Bataille is a surrealist, so the way he explains a story and multiple stories is through a surrealist lens. So if I can get more into detailing of aesthetic anthropology, the issue I have with surrealism, the reason why I'm not a fan of it, it can take any sort of form and then you just say, oh well, then it's artsy, regardless of what it actually is. Anything. Oh, a woman makes birth of a giant scorpion in her kuch. It comes out and starts fighting things. Well, that is so deep and so part of... It explains the condition of man. It doesn't do anything. It's nonsense. It's when you're high on some sort of drug and you just want to write something for the sake of writing. Grotesque for the sake of grotesqueness. Okay, I know that I just watched the video. Man, I'm more disgusted by it. But it's understandable disgusted by it. So the way he wants to describe a story, let's say a story of relationship or a story of a moral character, is by doing like Marquis de Sade. Now, George Bataille is a really bad version of Marquis de Sade, and a really bad version even of Leopold that we talked about previously, Masoch. Where he wants to explain a story of moral rights and wrongs and sexual rights and wrongs by describing something in quite grotesque details. That can be such as children, if you get my point with that. Shrimp, if you get my point with that. There is a reason why it was marked, but in the same time, I don't know. I can talk to you for hours about Marquis de Sade, even Leopold. Leopold actually fascinated me. I want to talk more about Leopold. There was something honest with what he wrote, because he went through it, he lived through it, he understood it through his own experience, and the way he wrote it was simple. So, the feeling of dread and the feeling of being in that submissive position, I can understand, because he writes it because he feels it. With Bataille, there is no feeling of it. Bataille was an even failure in his own sexual life. So he didn't have a bunch of virgins as throwing themselves at him, and as stories hardly want to explain, because, I mean, he even created a religious organization at his university where the end goal was to sacrifice a virgin, and he couldn't get a virgin to agree upon being sacrificed. What? But overall, Bataille was even mocked at his time. But, so, with aesthetic anthropology, it's explained to Reza, and okay, I'm going to give Reza a little bit more credit here. The way you describe a story throughout its time, and especially Goethe, if you want to take a good one with understanding the human psyche, take Goethe as an example. Or even Otto! Damn, even Otto is better than Bataille. I'm sorry, but I don't like Bataille. I think Bataille is a moron. It's fascinating. But explaining the human condition through linguistics, through the way they draw something, the way they explain something, everyone in this have so well done it. Okay, credit to Reza. Again, credit to Reza. It's absolutely correct. Like, the way that the other gentlemen in this 12 stories have explained things through their way of describing a story is describing the human condition. Just not this guy, just not Bataille. He is a copy of Marquis de Sade 100 years after, where he rewrites the story of de Sade. And I mean, he rewrites it poorly too. Marquis de Sade goes through a story of, let's say, a virgin girl, a young girl who is destitute. She has to survive, and a way of surviving is through your body, where she ends up in prison. She has to offer herself to a god, but she doesn't want to because she's still a virgin. There's an honor in being a virgin still, but she can use on selling off her purity to another man as a way of gaining leverage. Understandable. 120 Days of Sodom is just the Epstein files in modern ways, and it's explaining why people are eating children today. It's explaining why, in such a proper way, an actually well-written way, of why the human condition leads us to a destructive pattern. Bataille tried the same thing, and he just failed. And then somebody said, but bro, Bataille's about transgressions, bro. It's about breaking that taboo and seeing where the actual human conditions lie. Fuck off. Genuinely. You have to be dumb. So are the other guys, but they do it in a proper manner. The only transgression that happened here is that his wife left him, Sylvain Bataille, for Lacan, for Jacques Lacan. That is a transgression in and of itself. Being cooked, that's a transgression. My boy Bataille, at least the Galician man, wrote a good story that transcended him. You just got cooked by Lacan. So I'm gonna make this an hour long because I'm so close to an hour. I'm gonna make it an hour long exactly. Walter Benjamin, someone I covered before, describes Bataille's acapelle, which is this cult of his fascination with sacrifice as pre-fascist aestheticism. What nonsense. But anyway, sacrifice is fascism now. Okay, buddy. Okay, thumbs up. The concept of pornography I want to go into here again. Story of the Eye, I've talked about it. Watch my video about it. It's old, dated, and I genuinely don't like it. But in the sense, it was read as pure pornography when it started in the States here. And then it's like, oh, it has a deeper meaning to it once you go into the... I'm sorry, I can't go into pages upon pages upon pages upon pages upon pages of children and then see a bigger meaning with that. I just can't. Regardless of that, there's one interesting aspect. A bit early on, have networking with surrealist publications, because I was thinking about surrealists more, and I was thinking about maybe doing something with the surrealist field. So I've been in the rooms with the surrealist publications, in the room where they sell. So I sit in a stool in the middle of a room, and it's just pornography upon pornography in every single wall, mostly of course Bataille, but most surrealism has just become pure pornography at this point. But half of all written surrealist literature is just straight up porn. And it's pictures of, women's leg, women's thighs, so on and so forth. Just nudity, tits, cocks. That is what surrealism has become. And that's because of Bataille.